All right, NYB community, welcome back for episode number 195 of the Minding Your Business podcast, entrepreneurship, real estate, trending news. There's no business like minding your own. I'm your host, Champ Ron. Excited for this episode. We're recording on Wednesday, September the 9th. And God, this year's already flying by. Do you know, NYB, do you know, if you've taken any time to think about this, that we have about a little less than 4 months left in 2020, right? So think about that for a minute. And I know some of you have wanted to cancel 2020, but don't do that. Every year creates a great opportunity. And even with all the noise and all the challenges that many of us have faced and endured and continue to endure, the positivity piece of it is that we're still here and there's still an opportunity for us to things right. And remember the three things that we all have in common, no matter what we look like in the mirror, no matter where we're from, what side of the tracks, none of that stuff. There's three things that we all seek. That's to be a little bit better for ourselves, a little bit better for our families, and a little bit better for our communities. And so if we keep all that in mind, outside of all the noise and, gearing up for November with, presidential elections and viruses and social injustice, all the different things that we've endured, some of the life transitions of people close to us and people that are at celebrity status and that sort of thing. As we get past all of that, keep in mind that those three things still remain prevalent. They were 1,000 years ago, they are today. And so keep those things in mind. And again, I hope as you're listening to this, you're finding yourself and those close to you that you love well. I'm excited about today's guest, and we've had a chance to chat a little bit, kind of offline some, and so I'm really excited for the value that you guys will get today from our guest, Shannyn Lee, who is the director of coaching with Win Without a Pitch, Win Without Pitching. Make sure I get that right. Win Without Pitching, the director of coaching, Miss Shannyn Lee. Just tremendous. And we're going to get into several topics today as it relates to selling. That dreaded word for some of you.
Yeah.
But hopefully it's not. Shannyn's going to help change your perspective a little bit on that today. So, Shannyn, thank you so much for joining here on the Mind Your Business podcast.
Yeah, Ron, it's great to be here. And your introduction just was really hopeful and uplifting. And I loved what you had to say, because I think we all have to choose to win right now. And there's a lot of good we can take from these days.
Yep, absolutely. There certainly is, and like we talked about, kind of offline a little bit, Shannyn. That there's a lot of positive things going on, and of course, if you look at certain platforms and things like that, it'll kind of spell doom and gloom, and there's always some challenge there. And again, we're realists, right? We understand that there's challenges and obstacles, but that's part of life. And we all are going to face those. And like you mentioned, the correct word is choose. What do we choose to focus on, and what do we choose to have as our perspective? And so we're choosing today to have our conversation with you because we want to learn more about yourself, more about Win Without Pitching, and more about what you're seeing in terms of the sales conversation and how that's evolved. And for those that are listening here in the NYB community, I want you to take great notes, because this is a critical area for all of us, whether you're in the workforce and or whether you have your own business or your own company or whatever it is that you're doing. This is going to be applicable today. So Shannyn, let's jump right in. Let's first learn about yourself. You kind of were groomed through the business development, kind of channel, a lot like myself in the banking industry. But you were groomed that way. But tell us a little bit about kind of your, upbringing and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny whenever I get asked this question, the things that pop up for me in that moment. And, I like, as a young girl, rode horses and thought I was going to be a professional horse trainer. And then I got the idea that I wanted to be an ambassador to a foreign country. And now I'm in a sales coaching role. And it's always so interesting to think about, how'd you get there? But I think the reality is, it was a lifestyle and a growing up where I had a lot of choice and I was supported. So I got to try a lot of things. And professionally, I started out actually on the corporate side of the equation. I worked for big Fortune 100 companies like AT&T Wireless and Safeco Insurance. And I did marketing and communications and investor relations. And when I sort of discovered that big corporate entity wasn't really me, and I didn't feel as comfortable as I should, and didn't think that I was kind of bringing all of my unique abilities to bear, I had an opportunity to go to work for a brand and design and marketing firm and do sales. And I had never done that before. I had no idea what that meant, but I jumped in, and you know what? It turned out to be something that I really flourished in, and that I really
Wow.
kind of had a superpower around. And so I love selling, and I think selling's fun, and I think it's noble, and I've been able to really build a fulfilling journey around it. So I kind
Yeah.
of went the opposite direction.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like you had, several options, obviously, coming up and, aptitude in several areas. What's interesting is when you say sales and people, there are people listening to this that will cringe. The
Yes.
word makes them cringe. Oh, you're
Yes.
selling. I don't want to sell. I'm not a salesperson. Yeah. Yeah. What really, I guess, attracted you to sales? You found yourself doing well in it. What did you find in your personality or your skill set, Shannyn, that helped you do very well or really achieve the results that you wanted in sales?
Yeah, and I think that landing in what we call the creative services space, so marketing firms, advertising, branding, it's the kind of selling that to me is kind of a more longer term consultative sell, where you're selling ideas and you're really needing to understand what is that challenge that that client is up against. And it's a lot of conversations, and it's a lot of bringing empathy and really caring and really figuring out how are you going to solve their problem. And so that kind of selling is the kind of selling that resonated with me. And certainly
Sure.
then finding win without pitching when I was on the agency side, and really deepening that expertise around that selling from a place of empathy and value feels right. And that's why I think selling, or business development, even as our audience would prefer me to call it, um, is a beautiful thing, and can be done in a way that really adds a lot of value. But I
Yeah.
understand why people cringe at the word sales too.
Right. They certainly do. And
Yeah.
I hear it and I've heard it for years and throughout my career. You talked about kind of that consultative sales approach
Yeah.
of selling on value and communication and respect. Talk about that and kind of get into win without pitching and your approach, your platform there with them.
Yeah.
What is win without pitching all about, and how that helps you kind of, I guess, is supportive in your vision of helping others, manage their fears through selling to ultimately get the results that they want.
Yeah. Yeah. So we focus on helping creative professionals feel more comfortable selling. And
Sure.
we help them to do this through, first and foremost, really positioning and really planting your stake in the ground around specializing in something that is going to matter and have value and differentiate you in the world. And then bringing a framework to it that brings process, right? So you don't feel like you're starting from scratch all the time, but understanding how to guide a qualifying conversation, how to really uncover that vision beyond what that person thinks they need. Maybe they say they need a website, but there's something bigger going on behind that. So we want to uncover that, and we want to understand how the process is going to go, and be really transparent that there's a way to go about hiring an agency, and the goal is to create the most value possible for that client to be. And so we want to have some really honest discussions with each other about, are we the right fit to work with each other? So
Yeah.
it's very human, it's very conversational, and it's very real in the sense that you have to be okay saying no and walking away sometimes too, because you can't work with everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, and that's a great point. That whole understanding of your managing your own emotions,
Yeah.
through selling.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found kind of through my career, Shannon, my background being in banking and leading kind of
Mhm.
frontline retail teams, is that people's perception of sales is me pushing stuff,
Yeah.
and banks we were very intentional, but it ultimately turned to be very derogatory. Obviously, what you saw happen in the industry
Yeah.
at one point in time, where there was a lot of what's called product pushing, where companies were just creating sales goals and then just cascading that down through the organization. And so then
Yeah.
the pressure became, you saw this with Wells Fargo, right? With their
Yeah.
lawsuit is the pressure then mounts on, salespeople to then get numbers almost at any means necessary.
Yep.
And so that sometimes can create unscrupulousness in your business practice when you take that kind of all or nothing, approach to simply selling versus what you described, which is understanding pain points, right, and
Yeah.
understanding what their true need is by asking those open-ended questions.
Yep.
There a lot of industries didn't have that, and so that creates that angst and fear that we've talked about thus far with selling. And so, how does your company, Win Without Pitching, support you? What do they do that you really enjoy that they support you in your pursuit? Because in reading about them, I loved a lot of the language that I saw. I love the
Yeah.
feel that I got, from the company. So, what do they do specifically, Shannyn, to help support you?
It's such a good question. I don't know if anybody's asked me this question before, and I love the opportunity to just share that Blair Enns, the founder of the company, has a strong point of view, obviously, around how people should sell. We want you to win without pitching at all opportunities possible. But what he brings is empathy and clarity and empowerment. And I think as the director of coaching and a member of the team, I am fully empowered to go do what I need to do to best support our clients and do what I need to do during the sale because I sell for Win Without Pitching to make sure I'm bringing in the right clients and saying no if I don't think it's a good fit. And I'm allowed to make mistakes and I'm not punished for making mistakes. We actually take a hard look and say, why did that happen? Let's figure it out better for the next time. So I feel like it is a really positive, empowering environment. And we're not afraid to take risks. I've always told Blair, working for him is a wild ride, but I trust it because we're always pushing. We want to be the best out there. And so we jump a lot and try things, and then we learn from it and make it better the next time around. And so it's quite a fun environment and a well-supported place to be.
Yeah, and that's tremendous,
Yeah.
Shannyn, because what another piece that I've experienced in my career is when companies don't quite have that type of vision or that
Yeah.
type of culture internally, that it then has that kind of negative impact. What I heard from you is risk taking, right? Which
Yeah.
is a part of, people that are successful take risk, right? They take, calculated risk in their business. And there's this culture that there's not a overt fear to make mistakes, to recognize them, to own them, and then move forward,
Yeah.
right? Whereas companies that frown against taking risk and making mistakes and try to keep things this highly stiff standard,
Yeah.
a lot of times that creates this culture that again people become fearful because really what they're fearful of is making mistakes.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I found this in playing sports that sports is a lot of read and react. You have to.
Hmm.
That's the reason you practice, and same in business. You
Yep.
practice so that it becomes, a reflex, right? You're able to read and then react to what's happened, and then part of that read and react turns to being proactive,
Hmm.
right? And so you see the best in things. Take any area, art, sports, music, whatever it is. People who practice it enough and are allowed to make mistakes and learn from it, it goes from thinking about what you're doing to
Yeah.
then being able to read the landscape. So everything slows down for you. When I got better at sports, the game slowed down,
Yeah.
right? And so when it slowed down, I can move at my own pace as the game slowed down. So I see things. My vision
Yeah.
became clear, and I was able to not just react to things, but now I can see things even before they develop. Right.
Yeah.
I've heard, when I've talked to, music artists, they see that, the song slows down, right? The notes slow down, right? And they're able to perform
Yes.
them, sing them. Same in business, great business owners, the landscape, all the noise going on, things slow down enough.
Yep.
Even as cars are, driving by, things slow down for them, Shannyn. And
Yeah.
so, I think, but that comes with having that culture that you described there with Win Without Pitching, where the owner supports and is embracing of, sure, yeah, I mean, mistakes will be made from time to time. That happens when you're moving, right?
Yeah. Yep.
The only one of the ways to avoid making mistakes is not do anything. So,
Exactly. How boring.
and you're still making a mistake by not
Yeah.
doing anything,
Yep.
right?
You
So,
just gave me chills because your observation about slowing down and seeing things, is this moment where so much confidence builds. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I think I've felt over the years as a coach is I feel really comfortable and confident because I know I'm allowed to do just that. Slow it down and see and take a moment to breathe and not have to have the answer right away, even though often I do. But like it's okay to not have to have everything happen right at once and everything happen fast. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And so, let's get into kind of along this line of what we're talking about, Shannyn. I love to hear your thought. Obviously, if you and I and your company, we all had sat down January 1st and said, you know what, I think we need to plan for a worldwide pandemic, guys. I've got this hunch that there's going to be a worldwide virus that's going to hit, that's going to cripple the economy. If we all would have laughed ourselves out of the room if someone
Right?
came in to say that, right? Obviously, you fast forward to March, and here's the reality, right? That a worldwide pandemic grips the world, and now we've had to make adjustments and pivot very quickly in a
Yeah.
lot of cases, personally and professionally. And it's exposed, some ways of living and thought that we have as individuals and then collectively. And it's also opened the door for some evolution of thought. That evolution of thought, I'm interested from you. Walk me through, working with clients pre-COVID, right?
Yeah.
So those months leading up through 2019, leading up as you're helping them, develop their sales conversation, right?
Yeah.
And then compare and contrast that, Shannyn, with, you know, kind of not say post COVID, but as we're going through the pandemic, is there anything to compare and contrast with that as it relates to what you do to help, organizations be better with their sales conversation?
Yeah. There is like a lump in my throat right now because when I think of those early days and what we were doing and how we were guiding and advising and just like holding onto our clients that were just falling off the ledge, right? They were really hard and challenging days. And we too thought, are we going to have a business? But what I can say that before COVID and after COVID, and it really is the God's honest truth, the way we approach selling hasn't changed because we always approach it from a place of empathy and client first. And can we help them? And can we add value? So I guess if anything, after COVID, there was a time after it kind of struck, right? There was a time to slow down and not and make sure we were appropriate in what we were selling. Make sure that if we were going to go and make an ask to a client and put a sales message in front of a client, that it was highly relevant and highly appropriate and very filled with value, right? And I think the other thing that maybe would have differed a little bit is just flexibility, honestly, like flexibility to help people with pricing,
Mm-hmm.
flexibility to maybe potentially even do some work for free just to keep things running in the meantime. Like we were okay guiding to break some of those kinds of rules. But I think through and through, it really is always about it's got to be appropriate, it's got to be in context, it's got to be clear what that client is buying from you and why.
Yep, absolutely. That's a tremendous way to put it. And you spoke about the empathy and
Yeah.
understanding again those pain points and understanding and listening for the clues into how one articulates their problem. One
Yeah.
of the things that I did when I was leading branch teams in banking, Shannyn, with people that were at the sales desk was
Yeah.
transforming them from product pushers, just the flavor of the day. Sometimes the bank comes in and, hey, we want more credit cards, we want more checking accounts, we want more loans, and so that
Yeah.
just becomes the flavor of the day, right? And we're going to give an award to the person that gets the most of it, and it's
Yeah.
fulfilling this culture of just competition for the sake of to get the award and have my name at the top versus what kind of do we know our customers, right? Do
Yeah.
we know our prospects? What do we know about them, right?
Yep.
Outside of their profile that you see on the computer that tells you that they've got $3,000 in a checking account and a $10,000 loan and blah blah blah. What do we know about them,
Yep.
right? So let's focus on knowing about them and listening, right? And
Yep.
and tying in our product knowledge to what we hear, so that we can make recommendations,
Yep.
right? And then be prepared to fulfill the recommendation by asking for the business. And as we did that, what we found is all the other stuff that everybody was stressing about, we did,
Yeah.
right? It's funny how that works, right?
It
We
is.
did that by not focusing on it, but just say everyone that comes in, let's get to know them,
Yep.
right? As much as we can, right? And so I loved what you said about that. That whole kind of, yeah, not really changing what you're doing, even though you were facing those tough times.
Yeah.
But Shannyn, focusing in on the conversation. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier about slowing down.
Yeah.
It sounds like what you and the company did was all the noise is going on, right? Customers are kind of freaking out, right?
Yeah.
What's tomorrow? We can't plan, we can't do anything because we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Yep.
And I think what it sounds like is you brought a calmness to your customer to say, let's slow things down. It's kind of like people who've watched the movie The Matrix, right? Where Neo kind of learns as he learns his place between the Matrix and reality. He learns how to manipulate in the Matrix, right? What
Yeah.
happened was things slowed down for him, right? So, a bullet comes at him, right? He
Yeah.
sees it coming at him at 1 second, or whatever, where a bullet normally flies at him. So yeah, now he's able to manipulate that and manipulate the computer and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's always what I give the analogy for with that is
Yeah.
it sounds like you help people kind of find their Neo, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Find their purpose and slow things down around them. The bullets that are coming at these business owners,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Customers, the government, regulatory place, employees,
Yep.
PPP loans, all this different stuff that's coming at them, and all this information. Wearing masks. Do I require a mask? Do I not require a mask? All this stuff. Slow that down and get into how do you get to know your customers and prospects? I love that.
Yeah, there's a something called the magic question that I ask on every sales call and that we guide our clients to ask. I don't know if you guys have heard this question, but it comes from Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach. And the question is, you and I are sitting down 3 years from today and you're really happy. What's happened in those 3 years to make you so happy? And then you're quiet after you ask it. And you don't tie it to that person having hired you. And it is a wonderful question to be asked and a wonderful question to ask because it allows that person to just vision into the future and think about personally and professionally what's going to make them happy. And you ask it earlier in the conversation than later because it really sets the context for where you're going to take that conversation and helps you, to your point, get to know that person better. And
Yeah.
it allows you to get into all of the other pieces of sales that can be hard, like talking about money or talking about who the decision makers are. It opens up a more natural discourse and conversation when you start there.
Yeah, I love that question. I wish we had met several years back when I was leading these retail teams. I would
Yeah.
love to have, yeah, that be able to get in front of the team. I kind of think of like one of my old ball coaches that would walk into the, always want to have some kind of motivational speech before we went out on the court or the
Yeah.
field that would say something, like really profound, like, hey guys, if the biggest thing is family, your religion, and Packers football, or
Yeah.
something like that, like just Walter just says something like really like that. That I like that question of tell me if we were sitting down having a conversation 3 years from now, and you're happy, what would have happened to make you feel that way?
Yeah.
I kind of took with what you said. That's a tremendous question to ask, particularly early on in the conversation.
Yeah.
And so MYB community, I think you should take notes on that one. I think that's one that give Shannyn her credit, but definitely use that one because I think that's tremendous, and that's one that I want to use as I have conversations in my business because I think it really, like you said, sets the tone, Shannyn,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it puts things at ease because
Yep.
one of the fear factors of sales is people on the sales side feel that the customer, they're going to have their wall up, right, and they are going to figure that I'm trying to sell them something, and all I'm going to get is a bunch of no's, and this isn't right, that ain't right, that sort of thing. And I think when you kind of early in that conversation frame it that way, allows your prospect or your existing customer to kind of not so much let their guard down, but now you're sitting shoulder to shoulder versus across the desk,
Yep.
right? So it's almost like physically, well, not even physically, like almost from an energy standpoint and the vibe standpoint, you're getting up from behind the desk and now sitting with them shoulder to shoulder,
Yeah,
right?
that's well said.
And that
Yep.
changes that changes the perspective of what that conversation is going to be.
You can feel everybody just kind of exhale. And as the salesperson, you get out of convince mode. You should never be convincing anyone of anything ever. And by asking that question, you take the focus off you and put it on them, and you build some instant trust, and everybody just breathes a little easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Shannyn Lee's our guest, director of coaching with Win Without Pitching. Just tremendous dialogue so far. In terms of the sales conversation, Shannyn, walk us through kind of what that typically looks like. Of
Mhm.
course, it can vary from industry to
Mhm.
industry and kind of who you're talking to, but just at a high level, what is the process that you try to embrace and share with your clients?
Yep. We believe there are four conversations that happen in what we call the arc of the sale, the buyer's journey. And the first one is the probative conversation. This happens often without you even being present. It happens through that buyer reading your thought leadership or being referred to you. So you're being set up as the expert. Then the next conversation is the qualifying conversation. And this is simply where you're vetting that lead to see if there's a good fit. Then we move, if it's determined, yeah, let's take a next step together, we move to what's called the value conversation. We
Mm,
spend a lot of time digging into pricing and value pricing in particular. And the idea is moving away from pricing based on time and materials to pricing based on the value and the outcomes you can bring.
yeah.
Yeah. And then if these preceding conversations go well, you move to the closing conversation, which should be the least pressure filled moment of the sale. And you're simply facilitating a decision. So, this is the arc of the sale that we work across. And then with each of those conversations, we go deep into mindset and behavior and tactics.
Yeah, I love that. As a follow up to that, Shannyn, with pricing, because I
Mhm.
often talk with whether it's business owners, people in the workforce, you learn not to sell on price, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of an early sales. You go just about any organization, you go to their training class, they teach you, don't lead with the price. That's leading with your chin, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But talk about incorporating price in that because yeah, and I'll put on the small business owner hat. What I
Yeah.
find with young small people that are early in their business is they don't really know their true value.
Yeah.
So they underprice themselves thinking that driving by a lower price is going to drive, more performance,
Yeah.
or they see a lot of memes on social media and they're tying the price to their responsibilities on their debt, right?
Yeah.
So they think, oh, mortgage is due, it's $2,000 a month, I need $2,000,
Exactly.
and they make that their price benchmark based on the pressures from personal or maybe business debt.
Yeah.
And I find in both cases, they're completely off, and their motivation then is completely off. And like you and I were just talking about, that energy of what your motivation is transfers that vibe to your customer or prospect. And
Yeah.
so they can pick up on if you're trying to sell this because you're worried about the student loan people, or if you're trying to sell this because you need to get as many people on your books as possible,
Yeah.
right, to just drive sales through volume. So kind of talk about that from, all of us managing that mindset, to
Yeah.
pricing in the sales conversation.
There are so many motivators that cause us to behave badly in the sale, and you named a couple, right? Like you got to
Right.
make payroll, or you're just new and you don't know. Honestly, like starting out in a business, you do have to try a bunch of things to figure it out for yourself. And I wouldn't even advise somebody brand new into business to try and like pick an area of specialization. You still have to go on that journey of figuring out who you are and what your unique ability is before you can really plant a stake in the ground. But I think when you think about pricing, there isn't one pricing strategy that fits all. I think you do have to come to these conversations with an open mind where somebody may frankly just want to buy some of your time. And that's okay.
Mm,
Okay. You can buy a
yeah.
$10,000 block of time, and I'll do as much as I can within that block of time. Some people want to buy on deliverables. They need a website. They need a new marketing brochure, whatever the case may be. And so then you have to think more deeply about, okay, I'm going to use a project-based fee most likely for this scenario because they just need the deliverables. And some
Sure.
people are going to be open to that idea of value pricing and paying you for the outcomes you deliver and potentially paying you some bonus if you hit some certain triggers around certain metrics. So I think the first thing is being open and honest in kind of fumbling forward sometimes into pricing conversations and really trying to explore, like, what kind of an investment are you looking to make? Have you allocated funds for this initiative? Here's where I think the range might be, but I need to learn more in order to give you a more accurate estimate.
Right.
And so there's just, you've got to be okay exploring some of those things, and you've got to be also okay saying at the end of a sales conversation, okay, I don't I'm going to take what I learned and I'm going to go back and talk with the team, and then I'm going to come back to you with what I think a good next step is. If you need some time to really think about it and figure out how you're going to price it, you're 100% allowed to do that, and slow things down a bit like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So pricing is a big topic, but hopefully I hit some highlights to just think about.
Yeah, no, that's tremendous. Some things to think about because my approach has been what I've learned over time, and
Yeah.
you can share with me what you think about this, if good, bad, or ugly. My approach with your price. So in the consulting space, right?
Yeah.
You're basically positioning the value of yourself with the combination of your experience of what you've done to understanding what they need. What we talked about earlier is that empathy and understanding what a prospect needs, and then laying out, like you say, those deliverables.
Yeah.
And then, are you priced by the hour? Are you priced by, like you say, kind of a block of time?
Yep.
Kind of whatever that is. I've been always a proponent of, Shannyn, sharing my pricing early.
Mm-hmm.
I know, some strategies have been, do that on the back end. And it's kind of this mindset of let's qualify people, let's get them through, and then, I'll show the pricing at the end. I've kind of had more of the approach of the opposite, where I'm sharing, like you mentioned, that range,
Yeah.
to at least qualify them to see, what kind of conversation will we be having, and what direction will that conversation go, based on their reaction and how they see that range.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, there's the range, and then I want to, further have this conversation to learn more about your needs, so I can give you, like you said, a more accurate, kind of price structure,
Yeah.
for us to move forward with. And so, what's kind of your thoughts on that? In terms of kind of back end or kind of front end on sharing pricing, because I've heard different thoughts and that sort of thing
Yeah.
towards it.
I like what you do. I'm a fan of talking about money early. I don't think you need to necessarily, um, you know, kind of box anybody into a price, but to your point, like, let's at least talk about a range to see if we're on the same page. So I
Yeah.
think that's super important to do in the qualifying conversation. You don't want to waste anybody's time if they only have $500 to spend at the end of the day. That's just going to make them mad too, right? If you
Right.
don't bring it up till later. Then I think it opens this door also for you to test some things out, right? Like, maybe you don't nail price right out of the gate on this engagement. Maybe you've underpriced it. Okay, that's okay. You've learned. And now you're going to change for the next new client walking through the door.
Yes.
So I think it's good to talk money early. I like that.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Yeah, so yeah, I definitely agree, and that's kind of it been my approach. And
Hmm.
again, like you said, it doesn't allow on either side to waste time if we're not, like you say, driving on that same road.
Yep. Yep.
Definitely for sure. So, Shannyn, what do you see? As obviously none of us have a crystal ball with getting through everything that's going on right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you had to kind of take a guess or kind of think, but based on your experience, as we round out this pandemic, and
Yeah.
and listen, man versus virus, like I've said on other episodes, is been since the beginning of time. Once you had the first man and woman, there was some fight against virus, right?
Yeah.
That's always been the case. And so as it subsides, right, and people have used this term new normal, I tend to just simply say reality. There was reality before COVID
Yeah.
19. There's reality during COVID 19, and then as it subsides, there'll be a reality.
Yep.
So, what do you see as that reality, particularly for business owners, from that standpoint? And a lot of the the businesses that you're working with, what do you see them kind of evolving into as we round through this pandemic?
We have a lot of clients we're working with right now on positioning. I am inspired and just awestruck by the resiliency, honestly. And some of these clients lost their business in a matter of 72 hours, but they, like I said earlier, chose to win and pick themselves back up and looked at, what can I do next? What do I know
Yeah,
well? What do I have to offer? And they just continue to march forward. And I think we have to have that attitude of experimentation, right? Because we're
yeah,
all going to be faced with having to do things differently. And I think you muster your courage and confidence and you just start trying some things, frankly. We're seeing a lot of clients win. We're seeing some survive. We're seeing some thrive. We're seeing some, lose business and have to start over. And I think
yeah.
it's really all about, okay, what's going to be next and marching forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to go along with that, I think that there's, obviously there's going to be a deeper comfort level with remote virtual work. And
Yeah.
I want to get your thoughts on this because from a business landscape standpoint, right? And yeah, how that impacts commercial real estate that business owners will obviously they'll be zoomed out, right?
Yeah.
But they'll be very comfortable with the idea that my talent pool has now been expanded,
Yes.
right? So if I'm in New York City, I don't have to pay to relocate anybody to New York City, and I don't, quite frankly, have to limit my search to this New York City area.
Yep.
I can basically the whole world now is my talent pool,
Yes.
essentially. And so I think that's something that's going to change, that landscape of businesses going forward. I think that the ability to channel the cost that went involved in that into other areas around inclusion and diversity, around that client experience
Mm-hmm.
is a big thing. I think
Yep.
that companies are going to look for ways to automate human to human touch,
Yep.
right? And so I think that's something that's going to be big. Where do you kind of stand on that? That whole the landscape of business as we round out through the pandemic.
I feel like I finally am having my moment because I've been working home successfully for almost a decade now. And
Wow.
it's so possible. And sure, it has to do with like how I show up each day, but it also has to do with how the company supports me in that work
Yeah.
from home environment. And we've been put in this like awesome constraint driven exercise where we can't travel and we can't go to the office. So we get
Right.
to innovate. And I'm telling you, I think that we've landed on something that we can make work, and I think it is so possible to do all of these things from a home setting. And frankly, here's that word empathy again, love each other a little bit better because we get to see a little bit of what happens during the day, and that's okay because we're all just people, right? Even though we have other
Yeah.
superpowers in other areas. But
Sure.
I want people to embrace this ability to work from home, and so I feel like that's not going away. And I feel like the virtual conference scene is exciting to me. We've taken an in-person conference and made it virtual, and we're selling it out every time we offer it now because people are telling us, sure, we miss the happy hours, but we don't miss having to travel for days, being away from family and friends and the exhaustion of it. And we don't miss having to spend all that money on travel. So there's just a lot of opportunity in that space that I really hope we all embrace and continue to move forward with.
Yeah, absolutely. And to go along because we're talking about that evolution and the technology that can
Yeah.
go into that evolution. I think that something else will be virtual reality. I think
Yeah.
that the next piece will be businesses creating a virtual reality to not creating but the platform
Yeah.
to somewhat simulate, like you say, the in person piece. So I think the
Yeah.
day will come where a business will host an event like that or a conference, and you'll basically have your virtual reality set there in your home, and you'll look around and you'll
Yeah.
be in a conference center, and there'll be someone sitting at a booth, and you'll shake hands with somebody, and
Yeah.
I think that day's coming fast,
Yeah.
right?
Nothing
And
like
what
a
that's
constraint driven exercise, right?
right, exactly. So that day will come, and that's amazing that you've been working from home, for 10
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me ask you about that because you just kind of described that. Because that's a good a while for many of this. For many folks, this is new, right? This has
Yeah.
happened. This is a 2020, maybe 2019 type of endeavor. but for you for the last decade doing it, how have you managed things personally?
Mhm.
And it kind of leads to another question I have about family, but kind of how family is supportive of that. While you're working from home, because
Yeah.
many are struggling right now. That the perception that you're at home, that one, you're available,
Yeah.
two, you're not doing anything,
Yeah.
and or not doing anything all the time, and that so then go back to one, you're available.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
So kind of
Mom,
talk
I need
about
you.
that. Yeah, exactly. So talk about that as it relates to integrating with family as you've been working from home for so long.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing I did when this opportunity presented itself was I made sure I had my own office space. And I recognize everybody doesn't have that in their home. And that's been a really helpful thing. So, however, you can carve your own office out. And it's a little bit of training, right? It's a little bit of, hey, mom's downstairs right now working with clients. So you can't come in unless the house is on fire. Like there's just some training that has to happen.
Right.
But some flexibility, honestly. And for me, if my daughter did walk in the door, not freaking out and worrying about it, just like, excuse me for 1 minute, I'm going to help her, go on mute and help her, and then we continue on. So
Yeah.
I think having your own space is important. I personally have set hours because I don't want to be working day and night just because I can work from home. And that
Yeah.
helps protect my boundary and my time with my family as well. Um, and tools like Slack and daily
Mm-hmm.
check-ins with my team who are, in other parts of the country. It's that desire and ability to communicate, I think, a little more frequently on a day-to-day basis as well. That's
Yep.
some of the stuff anyway.
Yep, absolutely. You're exactly
Yeah.
right. Those tools, like you mentioned, Slack, that's something I use with a group in
Yep.
podcasting, actually, that a project that we're working on, we're using Slack, and it's been a great way for us to be able to communicate. And quite frankly, it's limited some of our need for, meetings, whether face
Yeah.
to face or even during Zoom, because we're able to
Yep.
communicate and share files. And then, of course, Microsoft Teams and those sort of things are making, are streamlining the ability to communicate and that sort of thing. So you mentioned the boundary with
Hmm.
family. I've got three girls here that are doing virtual school,
Yeah.
and they're elementary school. And so shout
Yeah.
out to all parents that are
Yes.
parents, caregivers, everybody that is doing that. That is tough. Whether you've got a
Yeah.
kindergartner, whether you've got a 12th grader, or anything in between, or even college students, or even kids that haven't reached kindergarten age yet. Definitely double shout out to you.
Yeah.
If you're home with, I've got a couple friends that are home with toddlers and newborns, as they're trying to work and do different things. And oh my goodness,
Yeah.
bless them. Um, but talk about the importance of family, just kind of
Mm.
overall to you doing business. You mentioned your daughter, Shannyn, and like I said, I'm partial to that. I've got three daughters.
Yeah.
I'm the only of my kind in my house.
You're just a solo man fighting the good fight, Ron.
I just got my wife, and I've got three girls. No, I do got two guide dogs.
Well, there you go.
But I found out that in a debate they don't speak up too well.
Yeah. No.
So they kind of leave me to myself
Yeah.
when it's time to have the healthy debates. But talk about family a second, Shannyn, and just what the importance of it to you as you do what you do professionally.
Well, honestly, part of why I started the work from home journey was so I could be closer to my family, right? Like the idea of being able to pop upstairs in between client calls and have some time with my daughter. We had a nanny or she would be at school, whatever the case may be, just felt closer and felt like it created a better family unit. Family is my rock. And we also, respect each other and trust each other and allow each other's independence. And that's something that works for my small family, my husband and daughter and I. And I think by kind of moving that way through each day, it also allows us to do things successfully like work from home. Like we know there are some boundaries and we know at the end of the day, we're all going to come back together and have our time. So it works for our family. And I hear you on, this day and age of trying to juggle being teacher and parent and work. I think you just also can't do it all. And we need to give ourselves a little bit of slack on that front
Sure.
and pull back on some areas because the first decision we made when this all started was we weren't going to try and be our daughter's teacher. And we
Yeah.
let go of some things that turned out to be just fine.
Sure.
And I think that's it too. Like, just that's that attitude of experimentation. Just try something if it's not working and see if there's a better way, and be okay if it doesn't follow what society thinks is the norm, you know?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
very true. Very well said. Very true, Shannon. Definitely aligned with you there. Fun question for you, Shannon.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a spare $100 million,
Just like,
and
if,
I decide, yeah, just a measly $100 million sitting around. It's
yeah.
it's get. I'm tired of stepping over it, so I need to move. We got to get this out the way. All right.
Yeah.
We decide to be generous. We say, hey, our friend Shannon, let's her and her family, let's send over $100 million.
I'm
Get it out the
sweating
way.
right now.
We're spring cleaning and we're tired of tripping over it.
Yeah.
We're gonna send it to
Uh,
Shannon and her family. So no strings attached. We bring you $100 million cash. What would you do with that money and why, Shannon?
I'm so giddy getting asked this question, and my hands are literally sweating right now. Um, so like the two things that come to mind, this is me, like, this is honest, right? Like,
Yeah,
our family believes that the best thing we can do is take care of our community and our neighborhood. So we're very active in like our small immediate area. We
sure.
would definitely do something to give some of that money to continue to make sure our neighborhood and community thrives. The next thing I would do is I'd go buy a horse, because I'm a horse girl and I grew up with
Okay.
horses, and I haven't
Yeah.
ridden in a long time. And I have a dream of going and getting a fancy horse from Europe and bringing it to the US and riding again. So I would have some
Yeah.
fun with some of that money too.
Sure. There you go.
And then I'd let the rest sit there for a while, and wouldn't make any fast decisions, honestly, because who knows, right? Like, that's a lot of money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And of all those things that I love, one of the things that I took from that is you would continue helping
Yeah.
business owners as you do today.
Yeah. I
With
wouldn't
win
quit my
without
job.
coaching.
Yeah. I wouldn't
Yeah.
quit my job. That's for sure. This is my life's work. That's how I view it.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. So with win without pitching, I could see you continuing being, director of coaching and continuing to add that value to your customers and prospects for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's tremendous. As we wrap up, Shannon, because again, this has been not only an enjoyable dialogue, but myself and I think everybody listening has learned a ton just about yourself and about the sales conversation and how to approach it from our own mindset standpoint to be that much more valuable to our target audience. What are one or two just best practices that work for you personally, Shannon, that you feel would work for others? Listen, because we've got several people listening to this. I mean, people that are experiencing or have experienced unemployment,
Yeah.
have had to close their business down during these
Yep.
times, have had an influx of business, quite frankly, on the positive end, and
Yeah.
maybe that creates challenges. They've had the tough nights of who do they lay off and who do they keep.
Yeah.
Obviously, with illnesses and things like that,
Yeah.
births, so new growths, growing families, right? And the joys and the challenges that creates.
Yeah.
So just to run in the gambit of everybody that's listening. And I think it'd be great to, kind of learn your one or two best practices that have really worked for you
Yeah.
kind of through your life and how those can apply to others listening.
Sure. So I am the kind of person that doesn't live in the what if world. I don't like to like what if myself to death and worry about things. I tend to just jump, and
Yeah.
it works for me the majority of the time. And when it doesn't, I learn. So I think like take action, jump, attitude of experimentation. Like, that is a big thing that I believe in. And the other piece of it is, this is like Brene Brown, and she struck me so much when she, talked about vulnerability, and you're good enough. You're enough. Like, just be who you are and be good with that, and bring your superpower. And if it doesn't work for everybody, that's all right.
Yeah.
So I think those are two things to hang on to.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that with being yourself. One of my quotes that I've always shared with this audience and others, Shannon, has been, "You're the very best you that will ever exist."
Yeah. That's
Right?
so good. Yeah.
You're the very best you that will ever exist. You
Yep.
make history every day, right?
Yep.
Because you're the only you that will ever exist.
Yep.
And so keep that in mind and live with that. That
Yes.
we all have our unique areas, and that's what makes us all strong, and that's what gives us all that tremendous value. And
Hmm.
so to be mindful of that. And like you say, to not what if things to death. I think sometimes we have a bad habit as people to look for the worst in things, right?
Yeah.
And think about the worst case scenario so much that it becomes crippling
Yeah.
for many of us. And I think that taking action. A lot of things in my career in life have been the same way, Shannon. That this podcast, for as an example, I've
Hmm.
shared this many times, and NYB's heard the community's heard me say this a ton, but I'll say it again.
Good.
um, for my 3 years doing this podcast, the part of the reason it's done well is not because I was such a podcast talent or a great communication talent, because that's
Yeah.
certainly not the case, right?
Yeah.
There are tremendous podcasters out there. There are people who have tremendous speaking voices and things like that. What I found in my career, Shannon, and this goes from sports to business, whatever it is, I've been able to have success by tenacity
Yeah.
and being there, right? So I've continued to make episodes. MYB knows if you go back and listen to some of those early episodes, you'd be like, "What in the world?" Right?
Isn't that fun though?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because I think that when I go back and listen to some, I was like, "What in the world?" But the thing is by continuing to do them right and
Yeah.
working, on your craft and being out there, whether you feel like someone's listening, whether you feel like nobody's listening, whatever it is, yeah, I just kept doing it, right? And as I kept doing it and kept doing episodes, not for the sake of doing episodes, but wanting to have great content and reading up on it and asking people, what do you think about this? What do you
Yeah.
think about that? And just being there. And I've
Hmm.
found a lot of times when I've just been there, I've found success. I mean,
Yeah.
I groomed in banking from that.
Yeah.
Like I say, it's not about just being the most talented, and it's not about being in the politics of it. It's not what effing things to death, but being available,
Hmm.
learning from mistakes, and moving forward, and taking action and taking some risk.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
yeah, it's been tremendous for me, and it sounds like it's been tremendous for yourself. And so I love that. It's a great way to kind of wrap up this conversation. Shannyn Lee, director of coaching with Win Without Pitching, was our guest today. How can people connect with you, Shannyn? If they want to learn more, they like what they hear, they want to learn more about your company. How can people do so?
Sure. You can go to winwithoutpitching.com. That's the first
Yes.
place, our website. And I'm happy to chat with people too. If you want to reach out to me via email, you can do that. It's just Shannyn at winwithoutpitching.com. But Shannyn's Shannyn, a little
Yes.
different. Yeah.
Yep, a little different than the
Yep.
the
Yep.
normal standard spelling of Shannyn, but
Exactly. So,
definitely love that. And I encourage you, MYB, to go out, kind of peruse the website. It's in the show notes, so you can click right there and peruse it, and then connect with Shannyn. Let her know that you heard her right here on episode 195 of the Minding Your Business podcast. Shannyn, any idea of podcast for you? I think you would and Win Without Pitching would have a tremendous podcast.
yeah, we're talking about some things. Blair Enns, the founder and one of our like good friends and also competitor at times, David Baker, have a podcast called The Two Bobs. But we yeah, it's very good. You should check it out.
Yeah, I need to check
But
that out.
yeah, but it's we're talking about some things where I'm the one actually doing the podcast and doing some interviews with clients and things. So that may be to come.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Well,
yeah,
it certainly, would love to have you come back and join, this podcast at some point in the future as things,
yeah,
continue to evolve. We'd love to hear updates from you, and learn more about what you're working on
yeah,
with clients and prospects. Maybe what you learned, or
yeah,
maybe what shocked
definitely.
you, if anything
Yes,
shocked you.
there are some things that shock me.
Yeah. So we'd love to be able to have you back on at some
Yeah,
point in the future, Shannyn. And if you guys ever do decide to launch any kind of podcast or any kind of platform, definitely let me know, because we like to share that with our audience as well. I like to equip this audience with as much in their tool belt as
yeah,
possible.
yep,
Not just this podcast, but others as well. It's great to get those perspectives and different angles on different topics, and so we love to do that.
yeah.
Yeah, but thank you so much, Shannyn. This has been enjoyable. I really appreciate you taking time. I know you're busy, got a lot of things obviously that you work with, but I really appreciate you, coming on and providing just such rich content for all of us to think about, and that's really what the spirit of this podcast is about. And so you've
Yeah.
embodied that today, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I loved it, Ron. It was great fun, and I'm happy to come back. And I just love what you're doing. I think you're killing it out there. I've been listening to some of your episodes, and I love it. You're here to help, right? And that's what it's
Yeah.
about.
Yep,
Yep.
absolutely. That is what it's about. And so thank you so much, Shannyn. Shannyn Lee, our guest, director of coaching with Win Without Pitching. Make sure you go to winwithoutpitching.com. Do that today. When you get done listening to the episode, go ahead and click in the show notes, do that. And then, of course, you can email Shannyn, Shannyn at winwithoutpitching.com. Make sure
Yep.
that you do that. Listen, thank you so much to our guests. For all of you, as you know, I've been working on my new website and it's out. It's released now. Woohoo!
Yay!
So now I don't have to send you to 20 different websites like I was before. I got great feedback from some of you that said, "Hey, Knucklehead, can you stop sending us to 20 different websites?" And I, of course, I didn't, respond to the Knucklehead piece, but I did respond to the rest of what was said.
Nice.
So you can go to champronbrooks.com. It's just that simple. That's where you can connect on the podcast and my other ventures as well, and escapades and whatnot. Learn a little bit more about me. Sign up for our newsletter, all kinds of different things you can do all from one place now. So that is champronbrooks.com. It's in the show notes as well. So check it out. Send me some feedback. You can subtract the knucklehead piece out of that when you give your feedback. Well, that's fine. I've been called a ton of things.
Yeah.
A lot of things other than Ron I've been called in my life. And so that's definitely fine. If I'll adhere to knucklehead if that's the worst I've got to face.
Term of endearment. Term
Yep.
of endearment.
There
Yeah.
you go, Shannon. Definitely. But listen, this has been episode 195. Subscribe to the podcast if you would. Share with, take 5 friends and maybe 2 or 3 enemies and tell them to subscribe to the podcast. 5-star, 5-star on Apple and wherever you get your pods. That helps us continue to expand the outreach of the Minding Your Business community. And so I definitely appreciate that. We're getting close to episode number 200. I'm gonna have something special.
Yay.
If for those that remember episode 100, you remember the energy and things like that, the fun that we had. And so we're going to double that and enhance that for episode number 200. So you want to be there for that. We're getting very close. And so that comes as a result of all of your support. And I can't say that enough. I really appreciate all of you. I'm a kid from here in Memphis, Tennessee, who, like I told you, had a teacher once tell him and his mom that I wouldn't be able to learn and speak like the other kids. And so this is a little bit of house money for me.
Yeah.
as I do this podcast. And I need to find that teacher's name so I can have her as a guest on the show. I'd love to do that. Maybe that'd be a great episode 200 is to have the teacher I've been sharing with
Oh,
you
do
what it's all
it.
about. If she's still around and we could find her, that would be definitely tremendous. Listen, Champ Ron, the Minding Your Business podcast. Again, champronbrooks.com. Thanks again to our guest, Shannyn Lee, with Win Without Pitching. Listen, you all go, remember the 3 things I said earlier. You want to be great for yourself, great for your family, and great for your community. We all have that in common. Champ Ron, the Minding Your Business podcast.